recording.
Good evening to everyone. This is Friday, fun day. Welcome. We're going to start off in thanking our participants from coming in, and for those who are co-moderating with us, such as Sister Panther Queen, myself, Sister Anna, we're our moderator, who's known as Poop, or, Sister Elisa is here to be our primary moderator. Tonight, what we're going to do is continue off with our read on chapter 9 and 10, which our moderator, Sister Elisa, will go ahead and proceed with that. But I will start off by citing the Statement of Unity for the Second Rainbow Coalition, which you can also find in Brother Kwame's book. And I just want to give props to him for all the good news that's coming in, and campaigning for justice for our brothers and sisters out there. He's with us in spirit while he is working on physically helping out his brother in power, who was behind the wall, and those seeking for justice, which we all deserve to have. Okay, the Statement of Unity for the Second Rainbow Coalition. Now I start off with the prefix. The United States was found on a colonial settler state based upon white supremacy and slavery, stealing the lands of the indigenous nation, breaking every treaty made with them, and confining them to, quote, reservations, in a quote, which mean concentration camps. As the country began more powerful, the eagle sunk its claws into the nation, making war on Mexico and grabbing its northern territory, invading Cuba, Puerto Rico, Hawaii, and the Philippines, and either annexing them outright or making them colonies or neo-colonies. And in the 20th century, it became the major imperialist power in the world, exploiting both the people within its boundaries and those in every other country, bullying them with military intervention and robbing them of their rights to self-determination. As Huey P. Newton stated, quote, "We have two enemies to fight, racism and capitalism," end of quote. Between the two, capitalism is primary, racism is a byproduct of capitalism. The working people of the world of every ethnicity or nationality face a common enemy that is destroying life on earth. Our enemy is a small ruling class of property owners controlling most of the world's wealth and resources. We must have our basic needs met to live a good and meaningful life, such as food, shelter, health, care, education, freedom from oppression by the state, and peace with other nations. To obtain these essential things for the life, we must have the power to see to it that the abundance that is available is shared equitably. Statement of Unity for the Second Rainbow Coalition continue as The legacy of the first Rainbow Coalition dates back to its founding on April 4th, 1969 by the original Black Panther Party, original Young Lords, and Young Patriarch Organization. A number of other organizations joined the coalition not too long afterwards, such as the American Indian Movement, Brown Berets, Rising Up Angry, the Red Guards, and others. Since the following of the United States, the masses has developed a number of popular movements that came together to fight back against the capitalist imperialist system in various ways around particular demands. Nevertheless, none had established a movement quite like the first Rainbow Coalition. This historic movement was the first of its kind that established a model of class struggle like no other. The charismatic leader, Chairman Fred Hampton of the Illinois chapter of the original Black Panther Party, stated that at the end of the day, we weren't engaged in a race struggle. He said that it's a class struggle, God damn it. By uniting with the various oppressed ethnicities and masses, they were able to bridge the gap between the various ethnic communities that white supremacy had long sought to keep divided. This class solidarity equipped them with the material base and class consciousness to see the common class condition. Therefore, the necessity to form a united front against their common class oppressor. The capitalist, imperialist ruling class, the ruling class viewed this as the greatest threat to their class rule, and subsequently used the entire repressive forces of the state, such as the police, courts, jail, prisons, and intelligence agency, etc., in order to crush this emerging revolution socialist movement. We refounded the Rainbow Coalition on May 14, 2021, with the intent of upholding the legacy of the original Rainbow Coalition. We believe that this historic example is the model for the united front that will best serve our class liberation by upholding the 10-point program of the original Black Panther Party, which was subsequently adopted and later expanded by the original Young Lords, Young Patriots Organization, and all other original Rainbow Coalition members. We established our pragmatic unity. The 6 disciplinary rules that we uphold ties all of the organization in our coalition to a common professional discipline. History has bestowed upon our generation a common class mission to fulfill the representation of the capitalist imperialist ruling class represented by the Democratic Party and Republican Party cannot liberate us. Excuse me. It is that class intention and interest to uphold a common class oppression. Therefore, it is only we, the oppressed masses of all ethnicities and nationalities, who must build the necessary class solidarity, class consciousness, organizational structure, and a united front that will ultimately liberate ourselves. This is what the Second Rainbow Coalition is committed to. This is the historic mission we intend to fulfill. Dare to struggle, dare to win. Hashtag all power to the people. Hashtag boots on the ground. All members of the coalition. This includes the new African Black Panther Party, the American Indian Movement, which consists of Kentucky and I believe most of parts of the East Coast practically, the White Panther Party, Green Party of New Jersey, the Poor People's Army, La Mesa Nación, the Brown Berets, FERI, which represents or stands for the Feminist Uprising to Resist Inequality and Exploitation, the Guardian Rebellion, and what was the other one? Well, if I miss out on anybody, any other organization, don't charge it to my heart, charge it to my head. And this was dated August 21st of 2021. Now, the 6 disciplinary rules are: number 1, members will conduct themselves in a manner to bring credit to the coalition and will treat others with respect and politeness. 2, members will be sober when on Rainbow Coalition business and will not engage in any criminal activities while a member. 3, no member will engage in violence except in extremities of self-defense. 4, members will not gossip nor be decisive to the unity of the Second Rainbow Coalition. 5, members will not act as informers nor work against the purpose of the Second Rainbow Coalition. And 6, nobody is authorized to speak for the Second Rainbow Coalition unless authorized to do so. Now, if there's any questions, suggestions, or answer in regarding to the Statement of Unity, hold your peace, and we will go and proceed on with Sister Panther Queen, who will begin the chapter.
It mostly sounded good to me. Brother Shay, how are you? Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Panther Queen?
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. I thought somebody had a question. All
Oh,
right,
no,
so
you're right. No, I was saying hello to Brother Jorge. I just wasn't sure if he heard me. You're good. Go ahead. You can
okay.
start.
Chapter 9, the death of Martin Luther King Jr. What's going to happen now in all of our cities? My people are rising. They're living in lies. Even if they have to die, even if they have to die at the moment, they know what life is. Nina Simone, why? The King of Love is dead, 1968. Not long after the incident at the Y and the BSU office received a call from a distraught Black student at Franklin High School by the name of Cholis Flavors. Cholis had gotten into a fight with a white student and had been suspended while the white student remained in school. That was not uncommon. However, we had been observing dynamics of Franklin prior to this episode, as it was a mostly Black and Asian school, yet had no Black or Asian teachers or administrators. The incident with Cholis Flavors gave us an impetus for taking some type of larger action. On a rainy Friday morning, 25 to 30 BSU members from the UW, as well as Elmer, Anthony, and a handful of other Garfield High students gathered outside the Line sandwich shop across from Franklin to demand that Cholis be reinst- reinstated, and that the school hired Black and Asian teachers and staff. Led by Larry and Carl, we marched to Abracent as we crossed the street, chanting, beep, beep, bang, bang, aguaga, Black Power, aguaga, and headed into the school. Some of the Black students from Franklin joined us as we proceeded into the administrative office, drowning out the pleas of the little white secretary who demanded we leave. We asked to meet with the principal, who refused, so we barged into his office, our chants growing louder as we began to feel more powerful. The principal ran out of his office in frustration, eventually canceling school for the rest of the day and sending home the staff, leaving the school in the hands of the students who were too excited to leave. Larry and Carl decided to hold a rally in the school auditorium and spoke to a packed house of excited Black, Asians, and white students. We felt overjoyed and victorious. Never before had we experienced this sensation of power. Our complaints and gripes had always been ignored and pushed aside, making us feel like victims without rights, without reasons for grievance. Well, that day we showed the racist school district that the youth were ready to challenge each and every unjust act until things were made right. That weekend, we parted and reflected on our victory, eager for the next challenge. My love for writing and the theater was being overshadowed by these social issues that kept popping up. My personal life was affected too. My girlfriend Brenda gave me an ultimatum to let the militant staff alone or she would leave me. She was my first love, and for a long time I thought there would be no other, but there was no decision to make. I seemed to be losing control over the events of my life as though something were pulling me ever so slightly in an unfamiliar direction. It was like walking in one direction only to have a strong wind overwhelm you, moving you in another direction towards another place that in time becomes your rightful destination. Several weeks later, while I was lying across the bed listening to Coltrane's My Favorite Things, compla- contemplating when to start my English assignment, the doorbell rang. I knew mommy would answer it, but I figured it was for me, so I ran downstairs, only to find two police officers there talking to mommy. Miss Dixon, they said, we have a warrant for your son's arrest. For what? She shocked back, a serious look on her face. For unlawful assembly at Franklin High School, replied one of the officers. I was handcuffed and I left quietly with the police, telling mommy not to worry. I was glad Poppy was not there. Things might not have gone so peaceably. When I arrived at the police station, I saw Carl Miller and Larry Gossip, the two BSU heads. I learned that Elmer and Anthony had been arrested right in the classroom and taken to the juvenile detention center, and Troy's favors had been arrested as well. This was my first experience of going to jail. The King County Jail had been built at the turn of the century, and it showed. The place was a dark, archaic looking dungeon, like something out of medieval times. The only confronting aspect was that I was placed in the same day cell as Larry and Carl. We were dismayed by our sudden arrest, having had no idea that warrants had been put out for us after the demonstration at Franklin. We sat in the dark, cold, gray, dry cell, exchanging small talks, wondering how we were going to get out. At times, we glanced at the old black and white TV in the corner, sitting high up on a metal shelf. The day was April 4th, 1968. It had been one of those dreary Seattle days when the rain drizzles down constantly and passively. Then suddenly, Walter Cronkite came on TV with a grave expression on his face. We weren't sure what we heard coming out of his mouth. Even as we stopped our conversation and listened closely, we were still uncertain. Today in Memphis, Tennessee, Martin Luther King was assassinated. The world assassinated Reverend Bernard inside my head, almost throwing me off balance. Carl and Larry gasped, "What? What? No, man, no, man, this can't be real," said Larry. We looked at each other in shock. Walter Cronkite continued the broadcast, talking about the assassination and the riots that were beginning to break out in Harlem, Chicago, and Detroit. Stokely came on in Washington, D.C., holding a 22 caliber pistol, shouting, "It's now time to burn, 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 burn," as crowds of young people rampaged through the streets of DC. Other broadcasts came through, showing similar scenes of riots and mayhem in city after city. It was looking like the revolution had come, and here we were sitting in jail. The three of us retreated to some private personal space to try to comprehend the moment. Tears welled up in Carl's eyes. My emotions were going wild. I kicked and banged the steel table, throwing whatever I could throw, wishing I were out there on them streets. Martin had been heaven sent, a modern day saint. Our Mantaman Grandi confronting America and its injustice as no other man had ever done, and doing all this with no malice, no anger, no hatred, just pure love and pure faith. Through someday we could all live in peace and harmony. Later that night, those of us from the day cell were un- unhearsed farther back into darkness, down a dark corridor to our one man cells. I was glad to be alone, glad to be away by myself where I could grieve in private. I thought back to when I was 12 and sat on the corner of the bandstand listening to Martin, looking out on the crowd, feeling somehow responsible for his well-being, looking at his smooth face, feeling his love. Despite becoming impatient with his nonviolent, non-threatening approach, we young organizers still greatly admired his courage. He was our modern day savior. Anger filled me that night. There would be no more tears and no more dialogue. The war the war began that night all across America. I vowed to myself that Martin's death would not go uh, unavenged. If a man of peace could be killed through violence, then violence it would be. For me, the picket sign would be replaced, and in its place would be the gun. It was now an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. There would be no more unanswered murders. I finally dozed off to a painful sleep. The next morning, we were awakened for our bail hearing. We first met with two young ACLU attorneys, Mike Ronson, a Jewish man, and Chris Young, a white man. They told us that the courtroom was packed with students and supporters and briefed us on how to respond to the questions presented by the judge. I was the last of the three of us to walk into the courtroom. Larry and Carl had already been released. Now it was my turn. I felt almost overwhelmed looking at the sea of faces crowded into the courtroom. Some faces I recognized, most I did not. They all seemed to melt together, and I tried to maintain my composure when the crowd gave a big cheer up on my release. Mommy came over and hugged me. It was a relief to be out, but the pain of losing Martin was still immediate and very strong. At the same time, there was an even stronger sense of certainty, a feeling that time for major action was fast approaching, that our day of redemption was near. The next day, the Seattle Post Intelliger ran a large photo on the front page of Larry Carl and me wearing my Stokely shades, putting me into the mind of every cop in the city. After that photo, I could not go anywhere without being stopped and harassed by the Seattle pigs. That night, many of us met at Voodoo Man's house. America was burning over Martin's death, and we wanted Seattle to burn too. So far, Voodoo Man was the only one who seemed willing to meet our needs, to share our desire for revenge. He set out three squares of he sent out three squads of brothers to throw firebombs and handed me and Dwayne Hall a 30 caliber carbines, telling us he wanted us to stay there with him to protect the house. I remember squatting in the kitchen, guarding the back door in the candlelit den, the sounds of sirens all around, wondering what would happen that night and what the others were doing. Every now and then, a pig car with lights flashing would go by, streaking to some unknown destination. Voodoo Man was walking around with his carbine, eyebrows arched with a crazy, far off look in his eyes. Man, tonight the blood is going to flow. My thoughts wandered to imagines of armed black gorillas running across rooftops and through deserted, bloody streets. Suddenly, those thoughts were broken by the flashing of red and blue lights and unintelligible voices. There were four pig cars out front with their lights on. You and D wait here, said Voodoo Man as he stepped outside. Dwayne and I looked at each other, wondering what the pigs were doing. We heard Voodoo Man arguing with the police, and they arrested four brothers from the firebomb squad. They had returned to Voodoo Man's house, followed by the pigs. Dwayne and I thought for sure that Voodoo Man's bloodbath would start right then, out that night, a night filled with conflicting emotions, whether to stay or leave, to live or die, to fight or surrender. After several minutes, Voodoo Man came back in the house and the red and blue lights still flashing. We're gonna have to kill some of these pigs. They arrested the brothers. The man only the man only understands one thing, and that's these right here, he said, holding up his carbine. You brothers got yourself ready, because I'm in need of you two warriors. The pigs eventually left. The night went on with the constant sound of sirens in the distance. Dwayne and I dozed Dwayne and I dozed off and on, clutching our carbines, hoping we would live to see the next day. He and I played football and basketball together. Despite his diminutive size, Dwayne had become a phenomenal on both the football field and basketball court. And here we were together on this ugly night, seeking to avenge the death of our fallen leader. In the morning, Dwayne and I left Voodoo Man's house. Dwayne never went there again. I probably should have done the same, but I was in too deep now. For me, there was no turning back, despite what seemed a dim, sometimes suicidal road ahead. As a show of confidence in me, Voodoo Man gave me the carbine I had held all night. I sneaked it into the house and hid it in my bedroom closet.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. That was a whole lot to take in, huh? The first thing that I want to mention before I forget is the fact that in Memphis, not shit changed. If anybody has been paying attention to what's going on in Memphis, where they just expelled the two black legislators, and then they ended up getting back in. But it's just the fact of the matter that that's how it's just completely ass backwards there and completely blatantly. The one 6-year-old white lady still made it through, and she did the exact same shit as they did, but they only expelled the two young black guys, of course. And they just uh a lot of terrible things that I didn't realize that have been coming out now that happened in Memphis. Memphis seems like a very significant place for these kind of events. So Sarah, go ahead.
Yeah, in lieu of what you're saying, it comes down to the question of what is the freedom of speech? The freedom of speech, of course, is having the liberty to speak your mind, and as long as it doesn't pose to be a public safety matter, then it will go into legal matters where a person can be misdemeanor. And if there's any other threatening devices like firearms, it can lead to the 5 counts of felony or something severe like that. But it seems like now, if there's any type of, I wouldn't say disagreement, but being outspoken and what you truly believe in is against the norm or against the regulations of what is being represented as the whole body or as a house of delegates or representatives, like those two I believe senators who was like exposed and expelled, fired basically, and they was reappointed back to their position. And I see that the only reason why they were appointed is because of the massive amount of people who was rallying behind them. And people even question about why, the other senator who was, I forgot her name, was a tall white lady, did not get
Gloria
expelled too. What is her name?
Gloria Johnson.
Oh, Gloria Johnson.
Yeah.
And I see she played her position because she did not, speak out loud, but she stood right by their side.
Hmm.
So she did not, they did not see her in violation, opposing to the two senators who spoke without term or without permission. And then again, if you gotta go through the power to be of whoever the power to be or the marshal in place, then what is freedom of speech when you will be penalized for speaking out on any kind of subject matter?
Right. For me, sorry,
okay,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
No,
Yeah,
for me, it's
without,
of like how it just proves that working within the system, there's still a way for the system to be like, nah, fuck that.
mhm.
Like, look at how much support they had out there, and instead of paying attention to what they were talking about, they made it a whole entire other issue just to be like, it was
Yeah.
like the subject matter is a really weird subject because where I'm from, like the gun laws are so tight. So like I can't really understand how terrible it is over there when it comes to like how loose the gun laws are and everything. So I have a very skewed view of what's going on over there. But like uh like our statement of unity says, it's within how does it the Republicans and Democrats, it's in their interest for our oppression, like whether it be death, whether it be not feeding us, whether it be whatever the case may be. You know what I'm saying? Like it is very clearly on something about it at this point, because they don't give a shit. They don't get
Absolutely.
there's either dead kids, whether it be being slaughtered in school, whether it be teenagers dying from doing drugs. You know what I'm saying? It's very clearly not in their interest. Otherwise, they would have done something about it by now. They have the ability, they just don't.
Right. Right.
They would rather make a mockery of two young black men who were actually standing up for what they believe in, and whatever the case may be. Like, that was, whether the subject matter I believe 100% or not, like whether I have, it just very much solidifies my lack of faith in the system, and I hope that it opened up some other people's eyes to the reality of what they consider a democracy is actually kind of a facade. Not kind of, is a facade. That's
Mhm.
not real.
Yeah.
Anybody else got anything before we keep
But
going?
not only that, I just Gloria, she made it known that the reason she stayed was because of her skin color, and the
Mhm.
reason the other two were dispelled was because of their skin color.
Absolutely.
So, just it's crazy.
Yep.
Well, I feel that
Out.
anybody want to talk?
Go ahead.
I feel that Gloria had played her position in a safe way, because if she wanted to take or be a risk taker, she would have also spoken out, but she didn't do that. I didn't see anything that indicated her doing that. So I see her as being an advocate, but also safeguarding her position, not to be totally out of line. But when the mass of people were backing what behind those other two senators, then she became more vocal, and she became, I would say, a little more daring. So I kind of question exactly if she really was for being a supporter of what those two young senators have spoke in regarding to gun violence as a form of freedom of speech and to represent the people, but based on the situation environment where they was totally out of line. So what is out of line? When you also have to look at the rules. You have to look at, were they given fair warnings? Quite obviously, the mass of people felt they weren't. Were they really in well intention of presenting their points based on the true meaning of freedom of speech, where it wasn't derogatory, where it wasn't any kind of violation,
My
but
God,
just
drunken
but
stone.
somebody
Can you mute
somebody
yourself?
needs somebody need to mute their phone based on what they presented. I just felt that they was representative of the unheard, and by being a representative of the unheard, you are going to be more vocal, and you're going to present your point where it's going to ruffle up some feathers or whatever. And this going to always be a topic of discussion where slowly is just an indicator that our civil rights are being taken away to a point where we won't have any human rights to do anything.
Yeah, well, we're not gonna allow that to happen. But one of the things that just really stuck out to me, and I can't get over it, and I'm not even looking into it because it's just gonna make me even more mad. But one of the things that I think it was Justin Jones when he was talking, he pointed out that a senator peed on another senator's chair, and they were not expelled. Like, that is the kind of decorum that goes on in that place, and they want to call these men out for that and expel them. Like, it's completely from what I mean, I have no faith in the system as it is, but like,
Right.
it was just blatantly clear that the reason that they went after them is that they
Oh,
were,
definitely.
you know what I mean? How peeing on somebody else's chair? Like, what the hell is going on in that place?
Not only that, sister, but it was a clear indication of age discrimination, where
True.
these young senators were not valued as importantly as someone who's a veteran or got tenure in there.
Yeah.
And to be spoken, and for those young senators to be spoken not only in a harsh and undignified way, but they was chastised as children instead of representative and adults, was totally out of order. It was taken beyond a point of even the Republican and a person with the gavel not giving them respect, but just see them as troublemakers and immature. And it just signifies a whole lot where those individuals, especially the speaker, should have been penalized, and he should have faced some penalties.
Yeah, I heard somebody, I don't remember where I heard it, but I heard somebody saying something about that was like the most actual legislature that they've talked about
Wow.
was really expelling them. Like, that it's not a functional body, essentially, is what they were getting at. But yeah, no, I think that we might have gotten a little bit carried away with that, but it just was kind of fitting because it keeps on getting brought up. It was the same week that Martin Luther King was assassinated. Like, everything about that whole scenario just oozed
Yeah.
racism. It was really gross.
And then again, we have to look at the location. This is a representation of the South. So it's like you cannot change certain people of a certain age when they only reflected exactly what they've been brought up and what is shown as a norm, although it's not a norm or normal or normalized.
Yeah, I mean, I can only imagine what was normal back then if the KKK was formed there. No, thank you.
Yeah, yeah. And it was a lot where, not only Blacks, but of course, females, they didn't have the right to speak or to have the right to freedom of speech, especially when they in their 20s. So yeah, it showed a whole lot,
Yep.
lot.
Those are all very valid points. All right, anybody else got anything before I start chapter 10? And Brother Johnny, you want to jump in the middle of chapter 10?
Where it says I left my home in Georgia.
Well, I'm gonna do.
Panther merch.
I'm gonna start this one, and then I'll kind of stop and when I'm out of breath and let you know. Is that cool? All right.
Yeah, of course.
All right. Deal. Okay.
Yeah, if y'all want to split it up, if y'all need another reader, just let me know. I'll be more than happy to jump in. We in this as a team. We in this as a team. I mean, I have challenges with my eyesight, but I'll make it through. So it's no problem here.
All right. Thank you. Okay. Let's see. Chapter 10. The Panther. I left my home in Georgia, headed for the Frisco Bay because I've had nothing to live for and nothing's gonna come my way. Otis Redding, sitting on the dock of the bay, 1967. Several days later, a group of 15 to 20 of us, BSU and SNCC members, rented 4 or 5 cars through the BSU. Elmer disconnected the odometers so we would not be charged for the mileage we would be racking up. In a caravan, we headed down to San Francisco to attend the second annual West Coast BSU conference. Anthony Ware had attended the first West Coast conference the previous year in Los Angeles and described a heated disagreement between 2 organizations that had almost led to bloodshed. One was a cultural nationalist organization led by Malana Ron Maranga, or excuse me, Karanga. The other was called the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense, led by 2 brothers named Huey Newton and Bobby Seale. They were the same group I had seen on the news a couple of years before, leading an armed demonstration to the California Capitol building in Sacramento. This was the first time Elmer and I had traveled together without our parents. It was exciting to be in San Francisco, free of parental constraints. Young people from all over the country came to the city searching for meaning, looking for their place in a conflicted society. Otis Redding, sitting on the dock of the bay, had become a call of sorts for young people to come to the windswept hills and the beautiful bay of San Francisco. So it was no coincidence that we were here too, searching, looking to the conference and elsewhere for direction in our quest for liberation. After checking in San Francisco State, where we registered and got our housing assignments, we were assigned a driver to show us around and take us to our sleeping quarters. Our driver was a smooth-skinned black brother wearing a semi-short, neat, jet black afro. The car sped through the often narrow San Francisco streets, swishing past streetcars, old, colorful Victorian homes, and intermittent views of the Pacific Ocean. He took us through the Haight Ashbury district, where throngs of long-haired white kids wandered through the streets wearing rainbow-colored clothing. Some were hugging each other, looking glassy-eyed. Within minutes, we were on Fillmore Street, filled with proud blacks and black businesses, jazz clubs, blues clubs, barbecue joints, and corner liquor stores. Our driver pointed out significant landmarks such as Marcus Books, named for Marcus Garvey, and the Black Muslim Mosque. When we asked if he knew any Panthers, he began to open up. Yeah, I know a lot of Panthers. Matter of fact, we're gonna raid a Hell's Angels house tonight, he said, pulling some bullets out of his pocket along with a beret. He added, we're having a funeral tomorrow over in Oakland for a panther killed by the pigs. Eventually, he dropped Anthony, Kathy Jones, Gary Owens, Elmer, and me off at the black professor's house where we were staying, not far from the university campus. The next day, Elmer, Anthony, and I went to the conference and tried to find some workshops that interested us. We even sat in on a couple, but left disappointed. Not one was interesting to us, or at least none seemed to fill our needs. We saw a flyer about the funeral the driver had mentioned and decided to drive one of the rented cars to Oakland and check out the funeral of the slain panther, a young man called Lil Bobby Hutton. Larry Gossett, Gary Owens, and a few other BSU members went with us. On the way to Oakland, we stopped to buy some black berets to show our solidarity with the Panthers. After crossing the Bay Bridge into West Oakland, we spotted a small church in the distance. As we approached, we could see a group of black men in leather coats and black berets gathered in front. We pulled out our berets and put them on. As we got closer, we saw Marlon Brando, my mother's favorite actor, dressed in a black leather coat and black beret, standing in front of the church, talking to a tall black man. Bobby Seale, as we later learned, the chairman of the Black Panthers. We got out of the car and walked quietly into the small white church. Inside, it was dark and packed full of mourners. Standing on both sides of the church were black men dressed in black leather jackets, black pants, and blue powdered shirts with black berets. They stood half at attention, their eyes focused toward the front, where a brown wooden casket held the body of a murdered young panther. In the center front of the church, a group of older, heavyset black women were bunched together, wailing uncontrollably, reaching out to the casket for the hand that could not reach back. We stood there listening to the preacher as he gave his eulogy over the soft cries that sometimes erupted into loud shrieks. The faces of the young men and women in black were unchanged, almost emotionless. We fell into the procession as it wound its way to the front, past the casket. I looked into the casket of the one known as Little Bobby. He was so young looking, yet there was an oldness about him, his face uneven and somewhat swollen. The cries of Miss Hutton and the other women filled my ears, almost blocking out everything else. I didn't think any of us had ever experienced anything as somber and as sad as the funeral of little Bobby Hutton. On the way back to our lodgings, I paged through the Panther paper handed out at the church and read through the story of little Bobby Hutton, how he had joined the organization at 16 and risen to the position of Minister of Finance, how he and Eldridge Cleaver, the Minister of Information, had been cornered by the police in an abandoned house and overcome with tear gas. Bobby Hutton had been shot numerous times, despite having come out of the house unarmed with his hands up. He was killed just 2 days after Martin Luther King Jr. and the police crackdown on the riots following Martin's death. 17 Panthers had been arrested on charges of conspiracy to murder. Later that evening, we went back to San Francisco State to await the BSU conference keynote address by Bobby Seale. Those of us who had attended the funeral were in a solemn mood. Looking into the casket of little Bobby Hutton had almost been like looking into the future and glimpsing what the movement might hold. It was not the glory and the victory we had romanticized. It began to get dark outside. Bobby Seale was already an hour late. Elmer, Anthony, and I found a corner of the auditorium and stood quietly talking, waiting for the messenger. We were wondering if the Panthers were going to show up. Maybe something else had happened. Maybe the police had attacked the brothers again. Finally, the doors to the auditorium flung open and in walked Bobby Seale, followed by a handful of brothers and sisters. I recognized a tall, light brown sister with a big brown afro as Kathleen Cleaver, the wife of Eldridge Cleaver. I had seen her picture in the Black Panther paper. She almost glided across the room. Next to her was a panther walking with a limp. I would learn later that that was Warren Wells, one of the brothers wounded in the shootout. The entourage moved quietly, almost suddenly, occasionally whispering among themselves. The Panthers spread out across the audience. Jimmy Johnson, the BSU president at San Francisco State, introduced Bobby Seale, who took center stage. Bobby Seale looked, I don't know that one, beleaguered as he began to address the crowd. All power to the people, brothers and sisters. We just came from burying our comrade, little Bobby Hutton, who was murdered by a bunch of racist, fascist pigs. The pigs murdered Bobby, besides the fact that he was unarmed, despite the fact that he had his hands up. The pigs also shot and wounded the Minister of Information, Comrade Eldridge Cleaver, who is locked up in Alameda County Jail, along with 17 other party members, including our national captain, David Hilliard. The comrades were transporting supplies in preparation for a rally for Huey P. Newton at Defemery Park when they were ambushed by a bunch of low-life racist dog pigs. They killed little Bobby because they knew little Bobby was revolutionary who wasn't afraid of confronting the pig power structure. Huey taught us that we have a right to defend ourselves and we have a right to defend our community. Huey said the pigs occupy our community like a foreign troop occupies foreign territory. The pigs aren't there to protect us. They're there in our community to protect the interests of the pig power structure and the I don't know that word. Avaricious pig business men. Um, Brother Malcolm didn't take no shit. Brother Malcolm was a revolutionary brother. He understood that racist white America would do whatever it has to do to maintain the power structure. Brother Malcolm also knew that we are an international struggle for the rights of all people, whether you be black, brown, red, white, all oppressed people have a right to live decently. Brother Huey understood that. Brother Huey knew we had to go forward and organize the brothers on the block, the brothers that don't have any interest in this racist system. Black intellectuals always want to analyze. The hypothesis for this matter is that's a bunch of bullshit. We don't need to analyze this shit. We don't need to intellectualize. We need to get serious. We need to organize. We need to pick up some guns. I was standing in the middle of the crowd, separated from Anthony and Elmer. I looked around at the audience as the tall, rangy Bobby Seale continued, contorting his face and using his hands to punctuate his ideas and philosophy of the Panthers. Some in the audience were coming uncomfortable. Others were mesmerized, just as I was, listening to every word Mr. Seale had to say. Johnny, you want to go? Because I don't know how much more there is.
Yes, of course. At one point, he stopped speaking. Who got something to drink in here? He asked, taking off his leather jacket and loosening his black tie. I remembered the vodka I had brought earlier in the day as a present for mommy and poppy. I went over to the corner where my belongings were, reached in the bag, pulled out the quart of vodka, and handed it to a Panther brother standing next to me. He handed it to Bobby Seale, who opened the bottle and took a long swig. Soon the bottle was traveling around the room. It came back to me, so I followed the suit and took a swig of the tasteless alcohol and passed it on. Bobby Seale was loosening up. He became more animate. His facial expressions began to soften. He talked about being a drummer and a comedian in his stint in the Air Force. He talked about Martin Luther King and the Kennedy brothers, and for a few seconds, he portrayed a Black man chained up, struggling to be free. After nearly 2 hours, the speech was finally over and the lights went on in the auditorium. Without thought or hesitation, I found myself making a beeline to where Bobby Seale was standing. Elmer and Anthony arrived in front of Bobby Seale at the same time. We want a Panther chapter in Seattle. The words came out of my mouth automatically. And the fourth of us talked briefly, and we left our phone number with Bobby Seale. I had been seeing Martin Luther King speak in person. I had listened to records of Adam Clayton Powell often, and to taped speeches of Malcolm X. All these had inspired me. But the speech I had just witnessed totally blew me away, pushing off my safety perch, casting me out in the wind, my eyes wide open. I could not sleep that night. I only wanted time to move ahead. I wanted to speed up time, prolonging,
Propelling.
propelling me faster towards my fate. At home in Seattle, a week after we returned from the the BSU conference, I received a phone call from Bobby Seale. He and two other Panthers were coming in the following day at 1:30 p.m. I wrote down the flight information and told him someone would meet them at the airport. After the call, I immediately began to spread the word. By 1 p.m. the next day, about 25 people had appeared at our house, Chester Northington at John Inchberg.
Sure.
Inchlinchberg?
We'll go
Oh,
with it.
okay, Inchlinchberg, whom I had met a at Voodoo Man's, came carrying rifles. I sent Elmer and Anthony to the airport to pick up Bobby Seale and the others. When they finally arrived, Bobby Seale looked tired yet energized, a man on a mission ready to stir our hearts and emotions, ready to lay out the party's philosophy and platform to us young, eager listeners. He introduced his two companions. This is George Murray, the Minister of Education, and Brother Reginald Denning, the San Francisco state organizer, and Bobby Seale, scanning the faces of his young audience. All power to the people, replied Murray, a brother with a combined hair and dark sunglasses. The three Panthers sat down on the couch. Among our group were Kathy, Haley, Kathy Jones, Larry, Gosnett,
I think
Gosnett,
I think it's gossip.
Gossett, okay, and a handful of others, BSU members from the UW. Willie Brazier and some of his street buddies were there as well. It was quite a mix of young people. We sat or stood humbled, huddled around these three men of experience, listening immediately, trenchly,
Intent.
Intently.
intently to every word. First off, Bobby started to be a member of the Black Panther Party. Every member must have 2 weapons and 1,000 rounds of ammunition, and you need to know how to clean your weapon and break them down, and you need to know how to carry your weapons in a disciplined fashion. You dig? Right on, we responded. The party isn't just about a bunch of niggas getting together with a bunch of guns. You gotta have some ideology.
Ideology.
Ideology, Brother Huey says the power of the people grows out of the barrel of a gun, but at the same time, we have to study to understand how to unravel all the shit the oppressor has to put on the people, right? Right on, we answered quietly. The Minister of Education, Brother George, is going to talk to you about political education classes. You know who Franzen is? Brother George asked as we pulled out several books from a large, overstuffed black briefcase. He was carrying this book, Wretched of the Earth is Eternal for Panthers to read. Brother Franton, Fonten,
Bronze.
yeah,
Franz
Fonten
Fanon.
breaks it down about the theologic
Psychology.
psychology that develops between the oppressed and the oppressor. He talks about the
Algerian.
Algerian people and the fight for liberation against the French colonizers. We, as oppressed people, have taken a number of
Attributes.
attributes that can be considered
Detrimental.
detrimental to our struggle for liberation. This is another book by Fenton. Fountain. He pulled another book from the briefcase, Black Skin, White Mask. Somebody here taking notes? He asked. Kathy Jones answered quickly, I'll take notes, pulling out her high school notebook. Panthers must read at least 2 hours a day. Here is a list of books that you have to study. They got some righteous bookstores around here. Yeah. Someone below out.
Below. Yeah. Below.
Okay. Miss Baynet. I don't know how to pronounce that.
Boyetta.
Boy. Yeah, Boyetta's bookstore. And the books you can't find, we will send you some. The meeting went on all day and well into the night. People came, people left. My parents came in our work, prepared dinner as usual, not really saying much, but sharing the sense of history. We were all feeling many questions were asked, and the three visitors answered them all, including one, Joyce Redmond, post about the sisters in the party. We say that the woman in our better half in the party, a sister in our equal, and we don't play the male
Chauvinist.
chauvinist chauvinist shit. You gotta respect a sister just like you would a brother, you dig? Right on, we answered. Bobby spent considerable time talking about Huey Newton. Brother Huey was a bad motherfucker. When he ran the streets with his running buddies, he was known as a fierce street fighter, but he also read a lot of books. He always studied a lot of shit. Huey understood what was going on with the masses of the oppressed people. He realized that we have to organize the people against the fascist pig power structure. We have to rise the consciousness of the people and educate them about the fact that they have a right to defend themselves, just as it says in the Second Amendment of the Constitution. Me and Huey and little Bobby sat down and came up with a 10-point program and platform of the Black Panther Party. The 10-point program and platform speaks to needs of Black people, and all Panthers must memorize it, know it by heart. Number one, we want freedom. We want the power, determine, did I say that right?
Yes.
uh, the destiny of our Black community. Number two, we want decent housing fit for the shelter of human beings. I sat and listened to the words of Bobby Seale as he continued
Detailing.
detailing the Panthers platform. The words eased from his lips. His face was unshaven, and his uncombined,
Uncombed.
uncombed,
Uncombed.
his hair uncombed. He wore an unbuttoned blue shirt and black slacks. I felt privileged to have him and the others here in my house. I also felt uncertain of one
Uncertain.
hand. Yeah, uncertain on one hand. I felt the pull of history on the other hand. I felt afraid about the future and scared that bit by bit my young freedom was now being committed to the struggle. Who's going to be the defensive captain? Seal asked. I was caught by surprise, having slipped off into deep thought. Fingers were pointing my way. It was as if one wanted the responsibility for leading what would lay ahead. I felt a little like a trick had been played on me, and I felt for it because, as usual, my response was slow.
Reluctantly.
Reluctantly, I accepted my new role. Okay, Dixon, you're the captain. I want you to come with me back to New York on organizing and through the East Coast. There's a lot of shit we got to learn, said Bobby Seale. The title defense captain may have been placed on my head without my resistance,
Yep.
but I definitely was not to up ready to up and go with Bobby Seale and the others. I felt deeply about the movement, that it was rapidly gaining stream, steam, steam coming from the horizon, but I was not yet a true committed revolutionary. I was not ready to leave the comfort of my home, the love of my parents, or the tranquility of Mad Rona. Bobby and I can't leave right now. I have some stuff to take care of. I hoped my response didn't sound too weak, like a cop out. I needed time to think or to adjust to everything that was happening. The next morning, Bobby Seale and the others were gone, heading to their East Coast destination to appoint more captains to arouse. Did I say that? Arouse?
Yes.
The hearts of hungry young men and women. A week later, I would be on the first plane ride to Oakland and be, beginning of a much different life. Oh, that was
Wow.
good.
Yeah, that must have been pretty. Wow.
That was really deep there. That chapter. I mean, among others that I heard. But there was this one line, I mean, I still have in my head, among other things that Dixon has wrote on here, when he says at the funeral, for the hand that cannot reach back. I thought that was, pretty deep, looking at somebody in a casket, a loved one or somebody you knew, and you're trying to, grab them, but you're realizing, they're not reaching back. But I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I just imagine that their souls reaching back somehow, but just the way he stated it, this I mean, whatever I've read so far is very well written, very detailed and visualized, as if you're there watching all this, come together. And the fact that he knew all these powerful people, it's just, I knew he knew people that Dixon was just coming up and he wanted to be a Panther, but I guess it was just certain stuff I didn't know, but I know now. And it's really has, put a toll on me and my role in the revolution. And I'm seeing how this is unfolding so far.
That was excellent, brother. And yeah, when you read that part, I was drawn also, drawn back to attention where a hand is reached for, in representation that the other hand couldn't, because no longer that spirit was there. I mean, the spirit was there, but the present of the physical being wasn't there. And one thing I have to say about this whole chapter is that you had young people in their 20s who seen that, their struggle was to fight for, the country or the government to see them as being equal, which was far intense, far worse than, what we face now. Because you talking about the beginning of the Black movement, which directly commenced or began after the Jim Crow laws. So these men knew they had to, and women had to fight for their lives, where they was ready to die for anything to prove that, one, quote unquote, I am a man, or, to raise their fists and say Black power, which is no comparisons to other people shouting, I would say white power, is because back then, which is now, to be Black, you're not really being heard. And if you are being heard, you're being, heard to a point where you are being seen as a nuisance, such as what have taken place here. So I just can't, well, I was raised during that period of time where I was young, but just imagine being 21 years old and not respected, not seen as an adult, where you're supposed to be put in your place, quote unquote. I mean, and to have someone like Bobby Hutton, who was pretty much executed, if anything, at a young age, where it comes down to the only way back then, the only way that the law would see, individuals like him as a man is when he risks arrest and sacrificed to a point where he is murdered. And that's how I see, the 1960s to the early 1970s, the way society looked at our young Black men. That's the only way they would see, men at that age as being men. when they are so caught out of line, out of
Right.
content.
Also, Emmett Till. What happened to Emmett Till? Also, he was
Ex-
quote unquote
Exactly.
out of line.
Right.
So
And they butcher him. They
Yeah.
butchered him and left him, chain him down and threw him in the swampy areas or in the swamp. So I must say, really, people say, well, you can't really compare, what was then to now. It's brutalities, injustice. But back then, you had these young men, you had the young generation who was already sick and tired of being tired,
Mhm.
you know. And this is what you expect for someone who have tenure, who's seen it all, heard it all, and will sacrifice everything. So this way it'd be easier, or lead the path of for our people to be equal. But these are young 21, 22, 18, 19, or even 16-year-old like Bobby Hutton, who was just fed up, not being heard, not being seen because they have power, and they are Black, which, what's his name? Stokely Carmichael, aka Kwame Ture, had coined the term Black Power, because this is what they were fighting for.
mhm.
To be respected, to be heard, to be understood, to stand as equal as everybody else.
And
But the
also, what really stood out to me in this chapter was when they said the party isn't just about a bunch of niggas getting together with a bunch of guns, which is how the feds and everybody else portrayed the party. That's not what the party was about. And he also goes on to say, you got to have some ideology. So the party was more about having ideologies and organizing for the people's needs, not just walking around with a bunch of guns trying to intimidate people. That's not what the party was about, even though that's how the media portrayed them.
And you had a lot of people who was not only walking around for their rights, but you had a lot of young people who was walking with books in their hands.
Right.
And this is something that I pray that, I wouldn't say everyone, but we continue doing as a people. And for example, with our book reading is about the blueprint, and continuing with that makes a valid difference. What can you fight for when you don't know what you're fighting for? How can you present your point when you don't have, a basic understanding? And it's just come down to this quote by a revolutionary: without a revolutionary theory, you have no revolutionary movement.
Right.
So we have to, see the importance behind that, which you have said, Panther Queen, in regarding, you know, um, having a reason, having a basic understanding, having a theory, having the ideology, which, Aaron had mentioned in his book, of knowing what is the reason why,
Mhm.
instead of walking around with arms when you're supposed to be the weapon.
Mhm. Yep.
I couldn't unmute. So, one point that I was gonna make when you were talking about like the ages of everybody, Fred Hampton was also 21, but it's funny how not funny. It's not funny. That's a really bad verbiage. Not funny at all. When it's like, what is that guy's name? Lakeith Smith, I think, is a black man that just went to jail, or not even a man. I think he's 16 years old, and a cop shot his friend or killed his friend in a car accident, and now that kid is in jail for murder because the cop killed his friend. And then that same exact day, he like didn't charge a white 20-year-old with whatever crime it was. I can't remember. But they're constantly calling black people men and making them seem like they're more dangerous, just like they were talking about the party. Never mind putting actual guns in somebody's hand. They're just automatically viewed as a threat in the society that we're in currently. And that hasn't changed, I don't think, at all, when you look at the media and how people are portrayed.
Yeah, it's true. And I just think of the people that are still behind the walls because of the fact that they stood up for the rights of the people, human rights, civil rights, and they are receiving, or they are still in jail for 20 to 40 years, like Jamal Amin, and most of the other Panthers, where they are being charged or they have been sentenced behind bogus charges where there is no evidence that prove that they had committed a crime except to be the voice of the unheard. And they are still behind bars. And since there have been a lot of laws that have been changed, except for in the Commonwealth, because where I live, we still have laws that's dated back in the 1800s that you will be arrested for, such as cursing, stupid stuff like having a horse in the street, some dumbness that, the laws still exist. And if we can revise some laws where the Commonwealth states needs to look in, but that's like a whole nother issue to talk about. And it's a complicated, discussion. I mean, if we can change some laws, why can't we revisit these cases in which these most prominent brothers and sisters have been incarcerated, held in solitary confinement, and still serving out sentences when they supposed to be released and vindicated of all those charges,
They're probably shouldn't in
exonerated.
the first place. Anybody else got any other thoughts? Brother Jorge, kind of quiet today.
Yeah, just a little quiet. I just went to an encounter with my son. We speak of injustices, and I go back to the time of 1971 where 40 people, 39, 49, or close to 50 people were killed in Attica as a result of injustice. We were fighting for justice. We was fighting to be respected as human beings. Yet, many of us got killed as a result. And this is how this system works. The system is always, have never stood up and given anyone, particularly poor people, any justice. It has no justice. Democracy in this country does not exist. It's only democracy when it's scientific socialism. When it comes about, then you're gonna have democracy. That's the real democracy. That's people democracy. What we have now is bourgeois democracy, and bourgeois democracy represents the rich, not the poor. So we need to look at all the contradictions that comprise this country. And this country is going down and down, further and further. You know why? Because not only is it going down on many economically, but I was listening to a speech that was made by Richard Wolff. I don't know if anybody knows Richard Wolff, and he made a speech that he talked about in comparison Russia, the United States, and China, and who is going up as far as wealth is concerned, as far as richness is concerned. China is. The United States is going down and down and down, and Russia is going further down just as fast as the United States. And that's the reason. There's that fight right now with between Russia and what's that other country? Who they fighting? Russia. Who's fighting? Russia's supposed to have been fighting now.
Ukraine.
Ukraine, yeah, but really it's not Russia that is fighting. It's NATO, you know, that is doing the fighting, you know. But we need to look at this country and they talk about the immigrants coming in. But do you know that the real problem is not the immigrants? The real problem is that the labor in this country, there's hardly no work. You know, and the work that is, people don't even get enough money for their labor. So right. You know, we this country is really this country's really going real down, and all the prices are going up. Yeah. You know, you remember back in 1870, between 1870 and 1970, everything that all the luxuries that people used to have, it all stopped. Everything stopped. You know, and then it got to a crisis where the bourgeois had to sort of like begin giving us, you know, the cards and stuff like that, so we could go to the store and don't have to spend no money. But guess what? What happened with that? That created a lot of other problems for us. It created a lot of other problems for us. You know, so this country just to say this country is going really down, you know, and the Panthers, when we speak of the Panthers, we got to understand that the Panthers was doing a lot of good work in the neighborhood, in the community, a lot of good work. And that in itself was attracting more people, not only to the party, but also to their support. And that in itself created a contradiction between the system and the Black Panther Party, you know. And so many Panthers got killed. You know, they got killed because they were doing good work in the community. You know, and also they got killed because they were revolutionaries.
Right.
You know?
And you know what, Brother Chad, they really exemplify the fight for freedom, where you know, they showed by sacrificing and risking arrest power to be self-determined for the destiny of the Black and oppressed community. They were not afraid. They did not play safe. But like I say, they was tired of being tired with what was taking place every single time, every single day. And it's like, the nature of a panther. Panthers are very observant. They're very meticulous. They're very detailed, but you constantly push them or an animal to a corner, that animal gonna strike.
Yeah, yeah.
They're gonna strike. And I just, admire exactly what this young generation back then had done, which, I would love to see today. And the first weapon is by having a book, and like Panther Queen had read and also elaborate on, knowing the reason for your fight. And that's with the ideology, that is with the theory, and applying it to your situation of what's taking place now. Else you will have those who gonna take over and just try to and remain to keep you quiet, and use the law in a way where it will be nothing but a continuous power abuse of power. So
I
I
just
just
typed
want.
I was gonna forget, but what it really comes down to is like um socialism just washes out capitalism. Like socialism makes capitalism less possible and less prominent. So if the Panthers got any stronger and people started paying more attention and understanding like what caring about your neighbor is, rather than worrying about benefiting themselves and becoming a better individual like they want us to be programmed, like they have us programmed currently, most of us programmed currently. um that's why they killed it. That's why they killed Fred Hampton. That's why they did all the things that they did to stop the movement that they created, that they were starting.
They see that we are living in a system, of course, that is backwards. It doesn't make sense. And it's going to self-destruct. It doesn't make any sense.
Oh yeah,
Where
it's
you
got
have, there's a lot of people, the whole masses working for the elite, the bourgeoisie, as Brother Chad has said. And then you got the media going around saying that people don't want to work. It's sad that people don't want to work. There's no jobs. And if you live in a society where there's no jobs, there's going to always be the desire of opportunity. And
right.
that's why I say,
Sorry, go ahead.
I just want to briefly say that, a lot of people talk about what kind of changes can we make in our neighborhood, in our community. And my argument is, number one, we are discussing about something that have no right to be right, where we have the discussion where it need to be taken out in the street, where we need to speak to our youth who's out there hanging out with their friends, walking in the streets, not knowing where to go, but just seeing what they can get into. Not saying they out of control, but if you're not going to give our youth something to make them productive and engage in important conversations like what we have now and read, what do you expect from them? That's why some, youth are not respectful to the elders. That's why there are existence of gun violence, where that shouldn't be the reason, but there is nothing that is given to our youth to make them productive citizens. And we cannot have a discussion among adults such as my age, when everything need to be taken out in the street, and we should not be afraid to ask our youth, how can we be of help to them, or give them the necessary tools and information to stand up and represent the community and do a lot for the community.
And even with the jobs that they are able to get, like 16, 18, whatever year olds, not even any jobs at this point. Shit, my job, you can't, people have to pay, or people have to have 2, 3 jobs to survive right now if they're not making a certain amount of money, and you're still struggling. So they can claim that there's no job, or, you know, or they can say that people don't want to work, or we can say that there's no jobs. It's, are the jobs even worth our time, or are we just wasting our lives away to, I don't know, eat but not have a house,
Right.
or eat
And
or
it,
not shelter? Never mind a house. I'm not even getting carried away. I'm talking about an apartment. You know what I mean?
right, right. And it comes down to, I know I'm not living just to pay bills. And when we speak about work, you know, a lot of people talking about, especially the bourgeoisie, talking about jobs that out here, but there are people who don't want to work jobs. They want to work in careers would make a difference, you know, and it reflect on what happened with during the Clinton administration or Bush. You know, they're talking about there was always jobs. No, there was always dead end jobs. And it's just as worse than not having a job, making $5 and change, making nearly above $1.02 over the minimum wage. And when it comes down to, you know, the Constitution, you know, for example, it's always good to revisit. You know, even John Adams has said, you know, in light of guarding the virtue and freedom and preserving the principle of the Constitution, that he said, quote unquote, our Constitution were made only for a moral, based on what society defined moral, and religion people, showing that it was preference towards just the elite. Whereas also say it is wholly inadequate to the government of any others. So that's pretty, with this brief paragraph, this pretty much saying that we are excluded. I don't know if you can see it, but we are really excluded. It's just for the preference moral and for those who are religion people, you know. And that's exactly what society, what the government will always do in keeping that separation and defying us and profiling us, using us as workhorses or working machine until the machines or AI come into place.
Oh my gosh, the freaking robot dogs are back. It just reminded me.
Mm-hmm. It's gonna be more of that. They're gonna be our police force. And like I said before at the last reading, I hope that we got a plan to fight against steel and wires.
Lord have mercy. I don't even understand. I don't even know
Yeah,
how.
I seen they were trying to, it was not approved, thank God, but the pigs were trying to approve it was like a mechanical dog. It's like a mechanical dog that they were using to go in people's houses and, you know, basically do the job of a police dog. So I'm like, what the heck? And they put like a lot of money into, you know, trying to make this happen.
Right. Like, didn't we literally just talk about doing the opposite? And they were like, yeah, we'll work on defunding the, never mind, that we're going to give you robot dog.
Yeah.
Okay. Because that makes us feel safer. Great.
Because I want to give you an example. Matter of fact, there's a big thing going on here in Norfolk, Virginia, in which we're looking for a new chief, and everything is preference, where there's like positions that's out, which is normal. A position that's out, but they already made their selection of who's going to be in place, like the chief of Hampton, although there's unsettling cases that's about to turn into cold cases that this man couldn't fulfill, but left pretty much unresolved. And now he's the chief of Norfolk, and there's certain organizations that's, calling out city council for putting a person in office where the position was not visible for everyone to have an equal chance to apply for, and the process of selection wasn't transparent, which is the norm in most private, most public service job all over the place. And it comes down to the chief, before he was faced with either being terminated or retiring, and what he did is retired so he can retain his benefits. He was replaced by a city camera that's supposed to help reduce the rate of violence, which resulted of the high rate of gun violence right there in a particular area that caused that chief to face either termination or to retire. And I'm like, I see that more and more jobs are requiring less physical work or the presence of a human being in place of robots. And if a lot of people are being replaced, what are you going to do with those number of people? You don't need them. Because if you don't need them in society, you're going to try to take them out by war, which we closely approaching. And if it's not going to be war, some kind of war based on, pandemic or epidemic, they're going to be physical war. And if you won't control that type of population, you're going to find other means to get rid of, a certain number of people.
At this point, I think it's psychological warfare.
Oh, yeah.
Like they're just fucking with us, and they're watching us just like try to survive, and they're probably laughing about it.
Yeah,
but
look at Facebook.
I mean,
that's evidence.
I've heard multiple people say actually recently that they think that the war has already started. But it's just not at the level of what like we think, what I mean, when we think of war, like you're saying, we think of like physical and what's going on in Russia and all that. But like right now, like psychological warfare is real, and they've used that shit against us multiple times before. Whether it be like literal fireworks all night long or something like that, just to drive people insane, to like stop protesting or whatever the case may be. Like that's a tactic. That's the only one that I can think of at the moment, because it's like I've been awake since 4 a.m.
Right.
But also a thing that's been used over time, like historically. And
Right. It's fair.
and all of that other stuff, like that's just the removing tent cities. There's like a war, there's definitely a war on homeless people right now. There's definitely a war on trans people right now. There's definitely a war on Black people right now. You know what I mean? It's just it's all like in these different little pieces, so that there's definitely a war on kids in schools and freaking going to a theater right now or something like that. You know what I mean? They're not doing anything about any of those major things. But what it is that it's all like spread out throughout. Like one of them happens in Louisville, one of them happens over here, one of them happens over there. So it doesn't seem like all out warfare, but they're killing everybody, or they're allowing everybody to be killed.
Mhm.
Displacing unhoused people kills them.
Yeah, and just reiterate, the importance of the party, the Panther Party, because the Panther Party was really the purpose of being a voice in politics and representing politics. You couldn't be represented based on the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, the Independent Party. So they felt it's important to have the Black Panther Party. And it just brings the quote on what Aaron has said in his book on page 81, which brother Johnny had read. The party isn't just about a bunch of ninjas, I'm not going to say word, getting together with a bunch of guns. You got to have some ideology. Brother Huey says the power of the people grow out of the barrel of a gun, which was even quoted by Chairman Mao. But at the same time, we have to study to understand how to unravel all of the shit the oppressor have put down on the people. And it's important for us to know the laws that's out there to change what's really taking place. Because I have witnessed going to a city hall council meeting just to get the gist of what's going on, that you had a whole community of people who was present and presented their viewpoint of a decision that was made by city council, and you had the community to overturn that decision by calling in, by being present, by speaking up, writing in letters, and people say, well, it's good to have these numbers, which is a form of showing solidarity, but it's about organizing. Organizing is what is important, and also show as a danger according to Hoover, because it shows that you gathering together for a purpose, and you know what the reason you gathering for, and you can take what someone said, understanding the devil language, evil language, and using that language and fighting back with that language. It was Malcolm X, I'm sorry, who said that. Understand the language and use it, And this is the reason why, Aaron Dixon seeing that my people are rising, because they use their books as a form of weapon.
Well, even just like following the cops around with the law books and everything like that, like they literally use books as weapons. Like they had a lot of really, really good tactics that we could that we need to continue.
We need to. Well, we are doing it definitely by having these discussions, having our young generations of people to come in, not only to understand, read what have been left as a pathway or to carry the torch, but for us as older people to listen to what they need to say, since they are impacted.
I agree. Yeah. All right. Anybody got any last thoughts? We're a little over 2 hours now.
Yeah, I'll say something.
Go ahead, Johnny.
I'm just very honored that I'm surrounded by good people, talking about these things that need to be, talked about and brought to light. And as for Aaron Dixon, I'm really loving what I'm reading and what the conversations are going. And it seems to me that the book itself is like one giant poem, just the way it's written and the way the characters and everybody's in it and the way he's narrating and his involvement in there. It's it's really amazing to hear that. I've never read something like this before. And I have read several books, but this one like really blows my mind. And it's really an honor to have Aaron Dixon part of my anthology book of of poets and revolutionary writers. And I noticed that his father wrote a poem too about Emmett Till, and that poem is inside the book as well.
Mm.
And I just feel that him being part of the book is already going to be good, but now I'm seeing it as a different angle. As like, man, this book's going to be gold. It's going to be like in revolutionary history forever. And
Absolutely.
yeah, because what the I didn't want to get something. He told me to get something out of from his book. I'm like, I don't want to do that because it's already, he done said it, it's already there. And I was like, is it okay if I get something new? And he was like, of course. I mean, you can go to my archives on Facebook. I've said a lot of things and speeches, and that's what I did. I and paste a lot of things he said on Facebook, and I made it into a statement. And
Nice.
it's a very powerful one, might I add. And I looked and I
Right
saw a
on.
poem written from his dad, and I said, "Can that be in the book too?" And he was like, "Yeah, of course." And I'm like, "Has it ever been published?" He was like, "No, it hasn't." I'm like, "Man, I was loving every part of what he was saying, because he was recommended to me by Kwame, of course, because he told me, hey, if you get Aaron Dixon on your book, dude, I'm telling you, it's gonna be lit." I'm like, okay. So I talked to him, and it went well, and he loved the idea about poets and activists coming together as one and writing our stories. I was just happy about it. And I'm still, I still think back and all the people who are involved, and people, and their work and their poems have never saw the light of day, and they will soon. Everyone's going to see it for what they are. And, they're going to see what I saw and what I felt. It made an impression on me, and I know it's going to make an impression on everybody else. And my poetry book's going to be out in 2 weeks, my brand new one. So I'm just letting y'all know, first, because that took me like 2 years to write, but it was okay. I had all the time in the world. I've always taken notes in my head every time I wasn't writing. So like the feeling was always there about, doing something productive and making a difference. Cause I was like, well, sometimes, we can't protest like we want to. Well, let me write about it. So I was going back and forth. If I wasn't protesting or out, on the fields with everybody else, I was writing about it somewhere else. So it was either one or the other. If I couldn't make it, I was doing something else that people were going to know about somehow, some way. And I feel like I accomplished that, and now I'm seeing that from other people as well. They're accomplishing things in their own way. And, I love to see that. I love to see when people rise and their growth and, and their involvement in the movement, because it's important. Because as much as, you see all this discrimination and this people divided somehow, some way, this is like we gotta stand together, because people want us to fall apart. They want us to break off our connections, but we can't let them. They want to see us angry, and especially at each other. But that's not going to happen, because we have something they'll never have. We have heart and soul for this movement, and that's stronger than anything. No one can break that,
Mm.
and I feel what we're doing today, it matters, you know, and it matters a lot. You know, people are just catching on. They're knowing, you know, what we're doing or what we're talking about and what we're accomplishing and our, you know, our own side projects or whatever. You know, they're going to blossom, and people are going to see them, and they are going to want to be a part of this one way or another. Thank you for your time.
Hey,
Yeah,
I
that was
really
good,
like that.
Conrad. Thank you. That was real good.
I
Oh,
think that
thank
was a
you.
great way to close that out.
Right?
Oh,
Yeah.
you're welcome.
All power to the people.
All power to
Yeah,
the people.
yeah.
Power.
Power of the people.
All power.
Well, our next one is
Black power.
Sunday at 9 p.m., right, Serena?
Yeah, it's gonna be at 9 p.m. I think I'm gonna moderate it, but I'm just gonna make a vote and have a talk with my group and see who wants to be the primary moderator. But I just want to add on to what Brother Johnny's saying, we'll close it out, that you notice that every chapter begins with the song, and it just concludes back to the beginning where the Panther merges with the song of Otis Redding, where it said that I left my home in Georgia, headed for the Frisco Bay, because I had nothing to live for and looked like nothing gonna come my way. And it just really just sum up exactly what Johnny had spoken about, you know, fighting for the heart and soul of what you believe and what you see that represent the human dignity and respect for mankind. Black power.
All power to the people. All right, everybody
Power of the
ready to
people.
wrap it up?
Yep.
All right. We'll see you guys on Sunday. And other than that, all power to the people.
All
All
power to the
right.
people. Have a good night.
Good night. Black power.
Black power.